a dialogue about this very fascinating subject. We're going to talk about the soul tonight and its relationship to homeopathy and holism, and a little bit the why we've embraced holism at Mish. So let me go to the share screen and share my presentation with you at this time. So there we go. Okay. So for those of you who are new to homeopathy and I guess the whole understanding of the law of similars, you may not realize that it's actually 2,000 years old. So, homeopathy and the principle of similars goes back to the ancient Greeks. Aristotle recognized the principles of homeopathy. Hippocrates applied it in some recorded cases at that time, and even explained how he prepared the infinitesimal doses. And all through medical history, that law of similars was expressed or demonstrated in greater or less degree. And this is basically what Hahnemann based his work on. He had to translate all of the medical texts, or he didn't have to, but in order to go through medical school, he did. He didn't come from a rich family. His father was an artist. So the way he worked his way through medical school, and this is of course in the 1700s, was because he was fluent in Latin and Greek, in ancient Latin and Greek, he translated all of the medical texts written from earliest times, from 500 BC, for the library in Germany. So he translated all of that into the German language. And as he was doing that, there was one question that he had in mind all the time, and it was, in what cases is there complete cure? And what he discovered is that in cases where the law of similars was applied, there was a complete cure. And that's why he then, after he graduated and became a medical doctor and practiced as a medical doctor and was a researcher as well, and was even the medical doctor of the royal family in Germany and Austria, he decided to develop homeopathy and created actually a scientific way, and he was one of the first researchers to do what we would call today double-blind testing and provings. So today, of course, we have over 3,000 different remedies, probably close to 5,000 that we use in one way or another, but over 3,000 have been proved. There have been over 20,000 provings, and these provings, so this is what Hahnemann had developed, is this way of taking the homeopathic remedy. He would have 50 doctors or so repeatedly take the homeopathic remedy until they began to feel some symptoms, and then these symptoms were recorded. So they first had a baseline of, what foods they liked, how they slept, on what side of what position they slept in, what were their, the things that they had aversions to and the things that they craved. And they would do an exhaustive sort of baseline first with each individual. And then they would take the remedy, and then when they started seeing or feeling changes in either their dreams, their appetite, their thoughts, their ideas, or even their sensorial impressions, in other words, either hearing buzzing in their ears or seeing blurry or whatever, that was all recorded. And of course, the person recording this did not know what remedy the people were taking, the doctors were taking, and nor did the doctors. So it was really a double-blind test, a double-blind clinical trial. The difference with modern clinical trials is the clinical trial is done on healthy individuals, and because it's a law of similars, we try to see what the remedy elicits in the individual in order to then know what it can cure. So whatever symptoms were expressed in those medical doctors that were across the board were then symptoms we knew that could be addressed by that remedy because it would be similar to that disease. Okay, so that's just in a nutshell. But the point I wanted to make is that when we talk about homeopathy today, we're talking about the results of 200 years of research. So the research, the provings, and clinical experience has helped us as homeopaths to make an enormous amount of correlationships between physical and mental symptoms. In other words, it's been for over 200 years or longer that homeopathy is really a body-mind medicine. So way ahead of the modern era. What we know is that homeopathy is the only medicine that you can take per se that addresses all levels and all dimensions. And it's truly holistic because it acts globally on the whole organism. And this is now where I want to come back to the principles of holism. So the whole question here is, why as homeopaths at Miche are we so interested in holism? You know, why is that so important? Why do I have you take a course on holism when you want to become a homeopath? And that's what I'd like to explain tonight. So when we say that the homeopathic remedy addresses the individual globally, we mean that there will be changes elicited on the emotional level, the mental level, and the physical level. And that we take all of the symptoms on all of those levels into account. But even more than that is that it's not the sum of those symptoms, nor is it where they intersect. It's that we use those symptoms to go to a deeper level, a deeper understanding, to that global level, that global state that is beyond all three and at the root of all three. Okay, so when we say that homeopathy addresses the cause, it's not a physical cause, it's not an emotional cause, and it's not a mental cause. Whatever appears on the physical level, on the emotional level, or on the mental level is a symptom. Mental states and emotional states are never the cause of a disease. We talked about that in the last seminar. Emotional states and mental states are correlated and have a direct relationship to whatever other physical symptoms are there. There may not even be physical symptoms. What we're looking for is the state, the global state, the root of all of those levels, of the symptoms that appear on any and all levels. Okay? So it's not the intersection and it's not the sum. It's a different dimension. And so what is that dimension? Plato talked about the organizing principle. Okay, in other words, again, the root of all of your mental, emotional, and physical expressions comes from that one root, that one organizing principle, or as Hahnemann called it, the vital force. And that organizing principle is what maintains your body as a whole, as a complete. That's what keeps you in integrity. That's what coordinates all of the different activities in your body in every microsecond. You have over 35 trillion cells that are multiplying, dividing, that are interacting with each other, that are secreting hormones, that are absorbing nutrients, that are releasing water into the bloodstream. And they all have to be coordinated. When you, on a hot summer's day, if you didn't drink enough water, in order for your blood to continue to flow, every single one of your 35 trillion cells will simultaneously give up some of their fluid into the bloodstream so that your blood continues to flow. Now, how do the 35 trillion cells do that simultaneously? How do they know to do that? How do they know when to do that? And how are they so perfectly choreographed? They are the questions that really we should ask when we look at a living being. These are the questions that science cannot answer. And they can't answer because the answer lies on a different dimension. It does not lie on the material, physical dimension. The material or physical dimension is a symptom of a deeper dimension, that immaterial dimension that Hahnemann refers to. That vital signal that I showed you in a couple of the other webinars when I was showing you those, the electric shocks, the electric lightning that was going through the embryonic cells every time before a new part or new part of the embryo was being formed, and that signal, as the researcher was saying, okay, is the vital signal that then allows for that activity to happen in a coordinated way and in the way that needs to happen so that the organism develops appropriately, okay, and as a whole. So we can also call it the essence of the individual. The soul is the eddy. I've been referring to the eddy in the stream, that we are who we are. We are all part of the oneness of humanity, of life, of the cosmos, and our lifetime, who we say we are as a whole, is really an eddy in that stream. We are made of the same electromagnetic and fields and forces and vital forces that move through the universe, and especially on the planet Earth and through our generations and all of that, and that they come together to form this little spinning entity that we call me, that we call ourselves, this expression. So the soul is the movement, is the dynamic that holds the eddy together as an eddy, that we would be able to say, oh, that swirl is me. Well, that swirl has a certain shape, a certain speed, a certain size, and the soul, if you like, is what maintains that. Of course, in an eddy, it's simply the movement of the water that creates that. It's a little bit more complex than us, as you can see in this picture on the right, because we are formed of many different currents, of many different streams coming together and intersecting at the places that we call the chakras, as you can see again in this diagram. So what holism maintains is that everything exists within an interconnected whole, that everything is interconnected. These lines that go into forming this human being that we're seeing here, this field representation of the human being, those lines that come together to form that human being go out way into the far reaches of the cosmos. That illustrates that no thing is separated from any other thing. As a matter of fact, we're not things, actually. We are eddies, we are movements, we are dynamics, small dynamics within the bigger dynamic of the cosmos. We're a composite waveform, a waveform that's created by many different waveforms, by currents, evolutionary currents, natural currents coming from the earth, genetic, generational, planetary, and universal life energy patterns. We are a pattern that is patterned after so many patterns that exist in the universe. And we are a dynamic pattern that is moving through life. So what does holism change? Okay, so coming back to holism now. So what does it change in our perspective? What does it change for us as homeopaths? What does it change? Did holism change in the way that we see the world? So when it was written in 1926, what Smuts did was explain how mechanism, and this is in 1926, he said mechanism cannot explain the intricacies of life. Mechanism is too reductionist. It's too, I keep wanting to say mechanical. It's great for machines and it's wonderful for technology. But when it comes to living beings who are much more complex and who are actually alive, mechanism is too limited a concept to understand how that organism is organized, how a living being actually lives. So he saw the, if you like, the restrictions or the limitations of mechanism, because it no longer fit the understanding provided by evolutionary theory and relativity. Evolution is not mechanistic, and relativity, of course, goes beyond mechanism. And he realized that those two theories are coming much closer to understanding what goes on in life than mechanism ever could. So what's really interesting now, almost 100 years later, 90 years later, is that there are, and I've posted some of these, I think, on the sites and talked about it in other webinars, to see how many articles in Nature Review, in some of the leading journals, scientific journals in the world, are saying the same thing. Is reductionism dead? Especially when we're talking about living beings. Is there some other way than mechanism to explore the living processes? Because they're coming up to those limitations. So there was even one that said reductionism is dead. Like it's quite the theme now. What Smuts understood is that the universe is not just or only a bunch of billiard balls bouncing off each other in that Newtonian paradigm. Again, Newton was a wonderful genius. What he brought to mankind was mechanics, was the way of understanding the material world so that we could manipulate it and make machines. It is because of Newton that we have machines. Machines that are run by power, that we understood power and horsepower and energy and mechanical force, and that we could then develop the engines and motors and have, if we want to say, independently running machines, as long as they're being fed whatever fuel. So all of that mechanics is very on the level of on the dimension on which we the order of magnitude at which we sort of function every day. Mechanics is very useful, and mechanisms are very useful for manipulating the world, for making machines. Where mechanism and mechanics is limited is when we go beyond just our order of magnitude. When we go into the order of magnitude of what happens inside ourselves, or what happens on the earth, or on the earth and in the cosmos, mechanism is too limited. What we have to go to is a holistic. We have to move then from mechanism and a mechanical understanding of the world to a holistic and holism. And it is through holism that we understand the interconnectedness of the whole universe, of the wholeness of anything that we're looking at, and how wholes are created within that whole. So holism explains how and why wholes are formed, the interconnectedness of all wholes, of all things that we can call a thing. If you can give something a noun or say, and it's alive, then there's a wholeness to it. There's an interconnectedness of all those wholes. And holism also explains what makes a whole a unique whole. And that's, again, brings us to the word soul. Again, Plato's definition of what makes each expression unique and keeps that uniqueness in integrity and keeps the organism alive is the soul, the vital force, the dynamic force behind life. So what holism helps us understand is that the uniqueness and integrity of every living whole, which we can call a microcosm, because each one of us and everything is a microcosm, is maintained through the soul of that whole. Okay. So the integrity of every living whole is maintained through the soul, or the essence, or the vital force. So if it's a non-living thing, such as a rock or granite, the earth, etc., we would, all of the minerals, in other words, we would say, instead of using the word soul, we could use the word essence. But there is still, even in a mineral, something that is unique to gold, that makes gold gold and gives gold all of its properties. And there's a uniqueness to silver that gives silver all of its properties. And the homeopathic remedy made from gold, called aurum, is going to hold a different essence and a different vibration, a different signal than the one made of silver. So that essence, if you want to call it the soul of gold and the soul of silver, we can as well, because it's what it makes it unique. It's what gives it its properties. So the soul is a unique expression of the greater whole, the macrocosm, because every soul is a product of that macrocosm, of that greater whole, of which each microcosm is a part of. Okay, so when we really begin to understand, and I think the people who come to me, people who turn to homeopathy, the people who come who go to a homeopath for help with whatever challenge they have, is someone who knows that the mechanical model that currently is used by Western medicine, and we call it Western medicine, but it's not totally Western medicine, because as I showed you earlier, Western medicine is really, rooted in homeopathy, naturopathy, and the use of contraries, or what we would call pharmaceuticals. Hippocrates, who's the father of Western medicine, founded Western medicine on these three principles of cure: the law of similars, the law of following the natural movement of cure, and the law of contraries. Right now, medicine only uses the law of contraries in a very mechanical way. They've had a lot of success doing that, and as long as we just consider the body as a machine, then we're okay. We can do quite a bit. So whenever you break your leg or you have some kind of structural problem, we can, or if the body is doing something that could risk harming itself, we can, through our technology, stop that process. But there is no way that the law of contraries and the mechanistic approach that is currently being used in conventional medicine, I'll call it, there is no way that branch can support the life force, can support the whole. It can only support the machine. And there are times when we know that that's not enough, that our life force itself needs help, that we need help from the inside, not from the outside. So in order to understand and truly assist a human being, and especially in chronic illness, we need to understand the individual human and his or her uniqueness, her soul, so that we can support that uniqueness and we can support their particular vital force. So that explains why we have so many remedies in homeopathy, because we want to find the remedy that is going to be the most similar to that individual, that is going to be able to capture that person's uniqueness. So we are always proving new remedies and always looking for new remedies, because sometimes we are dissatisfied with the match or the lack of matching that we can do with the remedies we have on hand. In other words, we have a case that has a kind of uniqueness that doesn't have a similar in the remedies that we have. And so we go out and we prove that. We prove that remedy. We go out and do new provings of what we think that person might need to see if it's the right thing. But we're coming from that understanding, the understanding of the uniqueness of that person and their soul. And to do so, we have to understand his or her context. The relationships, the worldview, the perceptions, the interpretations. In other words, the keyhole through which that individual sees the world. What I love about holism is that it's dynamic. It's not just about the keyhole. It's about how that person moves through life. So I use the analogy of a keyhole just to give us a sense that each one of us is looking at the universe from a unique perspective. Each one of us is experiencing the universe from a unique perspective. There's no one who is sitting in my chair right now. As they say, there's no one wearing my moccasins, right? I'm the only person sitting in this place at this time. At another time, it could be someone else, but at this time, I'm the only one in this place, and therefore at this time I have a privileged view of the universe, as does every single other human being, because we all have a unique perspective. But it's not only the perspective that is unique, it is also our experience of the universe that is unique, and the way that we move through life. In other words, that eddy, the dynamics of the eddy is unique to each person. So what we look for when we say that we're exploring the soul of an individual, we're exploring their vital force, we're exploring them dynamically, we want to know what moves them. You know, when you say, oh, that moved me, I was moved by that, that's your soul. That's a direct experience of your soul. When you listen to music and there's tears that come to your eyes, when there's that sense of something even deeper than emotion, because you can't call it sadness or joy or bliss. It's something that moves you, that could move you to tears, but they're tears of joy and all sorts of emotions all together. So that which moves us is the soul. So we look and ask, like, when are you moved and what moves you? And I'm going to ask you actually to ponder on that this evening. Is what are the things that move you? Where are the moments? Sometimes watching the Olympics can move us. But what is it that's moving us exactly? What are we seeing in that athlete? What are we seeing in that dynamic? What are you as an individual seeing that touches you? So exploring your soul is exploring your life force, and that's what our weekends are about. The 8 weekends a year, the new me dynamic, as we say, new me means soul, dynamic is moving. So new me dynamic means moved by soul. It also means know you and me, that we're all in this together. But that being moved by soul and how we are moved by our souls is what we want to explore in our weekends. And that's what we want to do in person. That's what we want to share. We're going to have all different ways of doing that and experiencing that. So exploring your uniqueness brings you to see that dynamic movement that you are, the eddy that you are, enables you to see your soul. And shows you, and what's interesting about the soul is that we would think, well, that which makes me most unique is probably what makes me feel isolated, but that's not true. Actually, if we explore the dynamic of your soul, we go right through into the interconnectedness, because your soul is connected to the wholeness, the allness, the oneness that is at the basis of your existence. So what makes us unique and whole is also what connects us to the greater whole. And sometimes in being disconnected from our own uniqueness and instead selling ourselves short and trying to model something or someone else or follow in someone else's footsteps or fit in or be cool, all of those things that we start doing in adolescence, unfortunately, and regrettably, are the things that actually disconnect us from our soul. And in disconnecting us from our soul, it disconnects us from the wholeness. So we explore quite a bit the soul's code. In other words, every symptom, every feeling, every emotion is part of the expression of the soul, of either where there's a blockage of movement or an exaggeration of a dynamic. We're doing something with our movement that is causing us distress. And so the soul's code is an important part of what we use as the basis of our exploration, to start our exploration off. And those of you who've been doing Dynamic Health, of course, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Unit 4 is all about decoding the body's messages. And that's something that, again, we'll be doing a lot more in the Numi Dynamic weekends and the foundational course that goes with those weekends. So Mish, as you can see how important holism is for our approach, for homeopathy, for being able to prescribe on a very deep level, that level of the root cause of all symptoms, but also the root of the individual. We also need then to walk that talk and to embody a holistic lifestyle. And I guess those of you who've been doing the holistic integration exercises, you can see that those exercises are geared towards helping you integrate and bring holism into your life so that it's not just a philosophy or an idea, but it's a way of living. And in living that way, it becomes so natural to speak that way, to interact that way, to understand other human beings from that bigger container of holism. So we want to work not only with the electromagnetic field of the heart, okay, which is the most important electromagnetic field, and is the electromagnetic field that we use consciously in order to create a really safe, wonderful container for our clients. The electromagnetic field from our heart is measurable with a squid detector, and has been for a number of years, I think since the 1990s. And we can scientifically measure the electromagnetic field out to about 10 feet away from our body. So, and that's just of our heart. I'm just talking about the measurable electromagnetic field that will actually have an impact on a detector. Okay, I'm not talking about the auric field now. That's on a whole other dimension. I'm not talking about the vital field or anything else. I'm just talking about the electromagnetic field directly measurable from the heart, on which right now there's a lot of research going on in a lot of the cardiac hospitals and cardiac research centers, is we're seeing the importance of understanding the electromagnetic properties of the heart. What we do at Mish is develop ways of consciously knowing when we are in what's called heart resonance and when our field is in coherence. And in creating that coherent field and extending it out, because it just naturally extends out to 10 feet, the client sitting in front of us at 3 or 4 feet away is inside that coherent field of our heart. So we actually take our clients inside our own field and try to maintain a coherent field for them, so that when they come in and they can talk about their incoherence, they can talk about their dis-ease, they can talk about whatever's going off in their life, bathed in a sea, if you like, of coherence, so that there's a lot more clarity as to what that incoherence is. And by the end of the session, especially if we've been able to listen in a way and come to an understanding of what's causing that incoherence with the patient, with the client, and come to a really deep understanding of what's happening to their soul and that dynamic, then they leave the session already feeling better, because there's already been a resonance of coherence. They're already started resonating with a more coherent field that you're providing. And they're also resonating with the field that is implied in whatever remedy that came through the exploration. So even before taking the remedy, our clients report feeling better. The effect of the electromagnetic field of the heart of someone who is in coherence when they're in the presence of someone else, the effects of just being in that coherence can be measured scientifically. We can take blood samples of patients before sitting with someone who's in coherence and after. And what we see is a decrease in the inflammatory response, levels of DHEA, cortisol, uh, levels of stress response, and an increase of the, if you like, the efficacy and certain parameters in the immune response. And those changes will last up to 4 days without a homeopathic remedy. What the homeopathic remedy does is reinforce that coherence and maintain, therefore, the lower levels of stress hormones, the higher levels of the immune response, and lower levels of inflammatory response. We know that those three dimensions on a physical level are probably the most important physical markers of chronic disease and the most important contributors to chronic disease. So how does homeopathy cure? It cures by creating a resonance with the vital force, with the soul, with that very deep level of the organizing principle, so that the whole body is brought back into coherence. And with that coherence, of course, all of those markers are decreased, and therefore all of the root cause, the incoherence that is at the root cause of the disease on that vibrational level of the soul, is addressed. Okay, so it's a step-by-step process that releases patterns, releases conditioning, and allows a much greater expression for that individual. Anyway, I talked a little bit. You can see I got excited about that subject because I'm preparing my talk next Saturday, August 27th, about the heart of life. And where we're going to explore some of the things that I just talked about, the importance of the electromagnetic field of the heart, how it can be consciously expanded and brought into coherence with the field of our brain as well. That inner coherence of brain and heart electromagnetic fields is, of course, very, very powerful. It's very often what we experience in deep meditation. And that, of course, is part of the lifestyle changes that we do as a niche homeopath, is to learn how to bring our own beings into coherence so that we can hold that space for others. Anyway, so it's a free conference. If you can spread the word on your Facebook, on whatever social media you have, LinkedIn, I don't know, I'm not too good in that kind of thing. But however you can spread the word and let people know and tell your friends, we'd really appreciate it. We have for people in Montreal, we have posters and pamphlets. If you want to hand them out or give them to people, we can send it to you by email as well. So we'll probably send you all a little poster of this if you can share it with people you know. It's a free conference. I'd like as many people to know as possible about the importance of coherence in our lives and how easy and simple it is to bring into our lives. It's amazingly simple. It's not anything, it's not rocket science. It's something that everyone can do. And that's what I want to talk about at this conference, is to give, so that people leave with tools that they can use in their everyday life and experience greater health, and even be able to help others. Okay, so as I was saying, to go back to our subject and our discussion for tonight, holism is dynamic. Our soul is a dynamic movement, and we want to know what moves us. What moves you? When are you moved? And how do you experience interconnectedness and inner coherence between your heart and mind and soul? What is that experience? When do you know it's happening? How would you describe it? So let's just take a moment, and I'll give you a moment so that you can contemplate these questions and maybe take a few notes. And then I'll